Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Everyday Conversations regarding mental health. Again, having some technical difficulties tonight. Unfortunately, not quite sure what's happened with my guest. So we're going to run without the guest at the moment. Not sure where he's got to. You start with me. So this evening, we're going to talk about anxiety, depression, and substance abuse. That's what my guest was coming on to talk about. If he turns up shortly, then we'll get him into the live stream. If not, this will be a fairly a short one. You don't want me rabbiting on for an hour, so I'll keep it fairly short and sweet tonight. I know a little bit about anxiety, a little bit about depression, and a bit about substance abuse. Well, a little bit about substance abuse. However, never done it myself. I've I've drunk a bit in the past, and I'm susceptible to a little bit of excessive drinking on occasion. Problem is, I can drink spirits. I tend to drink spiced rum, and can drink quite a lot of spiced rum. It's a bit of a worry sometimes. But there you go. These things are sent to try us. So before we go on, obviously there's the QR code, and if you're feeling particularly generous, you can sort of put your camera up to that and you can buy us a coffee. It's not compulsory, obviously, but there you go. What else we got? Oh, just going back to that, what's the name? I've got a book out. Oh, collaborated with lots of other people, I might add. It wasn't all my doing. So I collaborated on this book through Podmatch, where I find all my guests for my live shows and my Ordinary People's Extraordinary Stories podcast series, of which there are a couple of hundred now. You can watch those on YouTube, or you can listen to them on your popular podcast app. So they're out on all the major ones, all the popular ones, and some of the unpopular ones, I guess. they're on a lot of the old doobie whatsits. So every Tuesday we'll go live at 8 o'clock British summertime now, with the live awesome quiz. Next week's quiz is going to be all about Easter, all things encompassing Easter. And we thought a little bit about it before with what's going on in London at the moment. We could have celebrated Ramadan, but we didn't have time to sort that one out. So we mugged off. We're just going to do Easter instead. What we're trying to do with everyday conversations regarding mental health is to take the stigma out of mental health, out of everything surrounding mental health. There's lots of things surrounding mental health, particularly things like suicide. Suicide is somebody's got to as far as they can go, and they don't know where to turn. And it's something that we can do. Take the stigma out of it, make it not a taboo, make it something that can be solved, something that can be helped. And the way people get to the end of their rope, metaphorically speaking, or jumping in front of a bus or something like that, it starts off with something minor, something like a little bit of anxiety, something that they get depressed over, that builds up and builds up. They don't know where to turn because of the stigma that's been surrounding anxiety, depression, substance abuse, alcoholism, general abuse. I mean, trauma. Trauma is a big one. Lots and lots of people suffer childhood trauma that comes back and bites them in later life. And lots of people carry that with them all their life. And it can manifest itself into something terrible. They start not believing themselves. They get low self-esteem. They start getting anxious, which then leads on to depression. And that depression takes them into a dark place. And without help, they don't know where to turn. They don't know who to get advice from, because it's been a taboo subject for a long time. I mean, sort of, here, take one of these. Oh, what's that? That's a man up pill. It's not the right way of doing it. The easiest way to overcome some of these problems is to talk about it, and to talk openly about it, and to let people talk about it. If somebody comes to you and you think they don't look right, they're not in the right frame of mind, and they start opening up, give them that opportunity, give them that time. And that's the key. If somebody opens up and starts to talk, or if you approach somebody, you think, are you all right? Yeah, I'm okay. Are you really all right? And you ask that question and they start to open up, just make sure that you have got the time to dedicate to them, to talk to them about it. The last thing you want to do is mug them off. That could be a catalyst from getting even more depressed, having a knock to their self-esteem, making them more anxious, and turning them down that road of a really dark place where there's no real return, and they end up doing something daft like taking their own life. And the last thing you want to do is have that on your conscience. So if you are going to approach somebody, if you are going to say, are you all right? Are you really all right? Make sure you've got the time if they start to open up. And sometimes that's all it takes is to use these, your ears. You've got two ears, one mouth. If you open up a can of worms, use them in that proportion. Listen twice as much as you speak. And that can be something that really does help somebody in need. It's something that really does help somebody come back from the brink of doing something silly. I use the term silly lightly, obviously. The last thing you want is somebody taking their own life and you're calling it silly. It's not silly. It's serious to them. And it's given people the ability to open up, to be able to speak about it, to make them feel comfortable speaking about it. We've covered many topics on this channel. We've spoken about bereavement. We've had a couple of or several episodes now of talking about bereavement, and I've had different people on at different stages in their grieving, from the very early days, from losing somebody that they love a couple of weeks in the past, to people like myself that are several years down the line after losing their loved one. I mean, lots of people know my story, where I lost my second wife. I had a divorced, a died. So far, this one's survived. I'm on my third marriage. My second marriage was wonderful. We were together for 25 years. We were married for 23 of those years. We knew each other inside out. I was still serving. I was in the army. I'd go off on an operational tour. And when I came back after a 6-month deployment, I'd walk in the house thinking, have I walked in the right place? She was addicted to DIY. I came back. I'd gone on a tour of Kosovo, and I had an early. The way it works is during a 6-month period, you'll get a week off or a couple of weeks off R&R. And I happened to end up with the early one. So I'd only been out there for about 6 weeks, and I had a couple of weeks off, and then I went back and did the rest of the 4 months on the tour. And when I came back, she totally changed the downstairs of the house. She had the kitchen knocked through, a new kitchen put in. At the bottom of the stairs, we had a bathroom put in with a shower. Uh, the whole of it changed. I walked through the front door. I walked out again to check that I was in the same house. I thought the house had moved. So, and within 10 minutes of being home, it was like I'd never been away. We were that comfortable with each other. So that was my story. And in 2000, I think it was 2003, must have been late 2003, somewhere around 2003 or 2004, she developed cancer. She had non-Hodgkin's high-grade lymphoma. And I got extracted towards the end of my tour of Iraq. It was about 5 months into the tour. I got a message to go and see the Padre. I'd only got sort of a month left of the tour, and go and see the Padre. What for? So I went to see the Padre, and he said, this was a Friday afternoon. He said, I've got some bad news. Your wife has been diagnosed with cancer. She starts her treatment on Monday. We're going to extract you. And he did. He said, go and pack your kit. And within 24 hours, I was back home. I was back home Saturday afternoon. And God, that was probably the worst weekend of my life. You know, and the wave of emotions that we went through. And because I'd built up a lot of leave while I was over, while you're away, you get extra leave and one thing or another. They afforded me the sort of pretty much 6 months of going through this cancer treatment. And at the end of it, I went back to work. She went through recovery, and they said at the time, if you're clear for 2 years, you're probably at the end of it. Year and 11 months later, it came back. I was due to deploy out to Afghanistan for the second time, and yeah, it came back. They took me off that rotation, put somebody else in my place, gave me the time to take her through the treatment again, and she didn't last. It got her. The cancer came back, and it was far more aggressive than it was the first time. And they were going to do stem cell transplant, so they took her stem cell away, killed her immune system, and they gave it back to her, but it didn't work, and she died after a week of intensive care. Horrible, horrible death. Wouldn't want to put that through my worst enemy. And about a month later, I deployed to Afghanistan, so I didn't have a great deal of time for grieving, really. The daughter at the time, she dealt with packing the house up effectively and putting it on the market and selling it. I came back for a week's R&R halfway through the tour, and all I had to do was sign some papers. And by the time I got back, it was a case of just get a van, move all my stuff into storage, and the stuff that I didn't put in storage, I took to the mess, and I lived in the mess then. And the house sold, split the money with the kids. They were able to set themselves up. And that's that story. And we've had several people on talking about their bereavement and their processes and how the emotions that they went through. And so once the dust had settled and I came back, I had about 8 weeks leave, and I was probably the loneliest I've ever been. and I found that really difficult. And I was in the mess one night drinking, as you do, nowhere else to go. And somebody said, "Have you tried internet dating? What's that?" So introduced me to internetdating.com. That was it. I went off on about a year's worth of dating. It was fun at the time. Cost me quite a lot of money taking young ladies out to dinner. Well, say young ladies. Picked on women that was all around my age. And it was a challenge, but I got through it. And anybody else that has lost somebody dear, time is a healer. It does get easier over time. You don't ever forget them. November is a tough month for myself and the current Duchess. She's her husband was my best friend. He died a year and a day before my wife, and we were great mates together. And sort of 4 years after my wife died, we got together. We got married back in 2010. We've been happily married now for nearly 13 years. 2 weeks' time, we would have been married for 13 years. And we have a pretty good life together. So we've covered grieving. So we've also covered suicide. My mate took his life. We didn't see it coming. He done some a few odd things that was slightly out of character in the weeks leading up to when he took his life. But at the end of it, it was a shocker, absolute shocker. So that's what we went through. And we've had people talking about addictions, different addictions. I mean, gambling. I mean, that's a pretty tough addiction to get through. People are addicted to gambling, and it costs them everything. There's one thing that you need to know about gambling. It's a mug's game. The people that do well out of it is the bookies. So if you want to make money out of gambling, become a bookie. Drink. How many people? I mean, the British Army, when I joined it, I think we was all functioning alcoholics, particularly in somewhere like Germany. Germany was I mean, my first posting was Munster in Germany, and I spent a year there before we got posted back to the UK, and we were drinking pretty much every night, drinking every weekend. That was it. Come Friday lunchtime, that was it. We was down at the company clubs, and they were all in the basement of these buildings that we were in. And yeah, we tended to be functioning alcoholics. We were on a beer all weekend down in downtown Munster. Munster was a great town. It was a university town in Germany, and yeah, so we got fairly well addicted to drinking, and we were heavy drinkers as well, all the time. Then we got posted back to the UK, lost our overseas allowance. That was a dent in the pocket. And for some of us, we decided that we'd get ourselves motorbikes, and we stopped drinking so much. So from that point of view, we were doing all right. So we had a couple of really good years in Gillingham. We were hardly there really. We were away on exercise a lot. Then we got posted to Berlin, and we kind of became alcoholics again. Berlin was a wonderful posting. We had back in that was in 1978 to 1980, 2.5 years we were in Berlin. Fantastic place, fantastic posting. Evening, Anne. It's hard sometimes losing people. You think things are going okay, then something hits you like a brick wall. Yeah, it's very, very difficult, and it's more difficult if it's sudden, I think. When you know somebody's a long-term illness, you know it, you know it's coming, and it the blow's slightly softened, but it's still tough. It's not quite as tough as somebody that's bomb here one minute, gone the next. I think that's quite difficult to deal with, particularly if it's somebody that's taken their own life or it's through an accident. Last year, I lost my best mate, um, who was up on the roof of his house washing off his solar panels on the hottest day of the year, and fell off the roof, um, and died almost instantly. That was tough. That's difficult. And we've had his wife and stuff on, and his children talking about their process from the early days to quite recently. So loss is something that we've dealt with. We've dealt with what else have we dealt with? We've dealt with trauma. Lots of people suffer trauma. I mean, they band around the word post-traumatic stress disorder, quite liberally nowadays. But I think what you'll find with trauma is it's not just somebody that's been in combat. It can be anything. It can be a witness to a car accident. That could be a traumatic incident for somebody. It can be getting beaten up in the street, getting bullied. That can be a traumatic event. And that, I think, happens to a lot of kids. That's where a lot of their trauma comes from. They get bullied at school, and when they get home, they're getting bullied by the parents. And some kids, when they do get through it, they carry that for the rest of their life, and it troubles them for a long time. Anne says, 2 sons of my partner lost suddenly. Yeah, it's difficult dealing with loss. But bullying, I've got somebody coming on in the next few weeks, talking particularly about childhood bullying, childhood suicide. There's an unprecedented numbers of children that are taking their lives at the moment. Almost as many as ex-servicemen. The coroner's office has now been instructed to record somebody that's taken their own life, whether they've been a service person or not. So now, since 2021, we're starting to see the actual numbers of veterans that have been taking their own life. They've recorded it if the guy's taking their own life in service while they're still serving, but they haven't while once they've come out. But they now are, and the numbers are starting to come through on the ONS, the Office of National Statistics. So we're starting to see these figures coming through. So we're going to be looking at child suicide, child trauma, in the weeks to come. So I think my guest hasn't turned up. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the pin out on this now. Hopefully I'll find out what happened with the guest and get him in another day. It's unfortunate because I don't like going all by myself. I can do it. I'm happy doing it. But it's good to have a guest to bounce off. So if you're still there, Vanessa, if you want to come and have a chat with us, that was the best way of doing it. You can get me through the if you let's think how we'll find a way of contacting, maybe through Keith. So until we meet again, I'll be live again next week, same time, 7 o'clock British Summer Time. And if you want to join me on Tuesday for the quiz, live at 8 o'clock British Summer Time, got a great quiz for you next week, all about Easter, all about Easter eggs and stuff like that. It should be a lot of fun. Hopefully the Duchess will come in and co-present with me. She's the compilator. She makes up all these quizzes. She checks the answers to make sure that they're correct. And if I can convince her to come and have a mug on camera while we're presenting, it should be a good laugh. So until then, thank you so much for joining in, and I'll see you again soon. Thank you very much.